I think we can all agree that women aren't small men and we cannot hold ourselves to the same standard each day of the month. While the hormone balancing cycle syncing trend is very positive because it encourages women to learn more about their hormonal health, their reproductive health, a lot of the advice out there makes zero sense and it diverts the attention from the things that could actually benefit your health and well-being. And after watching today's video, I hope you'll be able to filter out what is actually scientifically backed and can indeed improve your hormonal health, and what is just another TikTok to hop on the hormone balancing trend. All of the resources that I'll be using are linked down in the description box below if you want to go and read them yourself. If you're a woman watching this, I assume that you know about the phases of your menstrual cycle, but just in case you're new to the party, we'll do a quick overview of everything. There are two main hormones that come into play when talking about our menstrual cycle fluctuations, and those are estrogen and progesterone. The first phase of our menstrual cycle is technically our period. Day one of our cycle is the day you get your period, and here both of those hormones are in quite low concentrations. This phase lasts until the last day of the period, so when your bleeding stops, which is individual for each person, but somewhere between 5 and 7 is where this bleeding would end. The second phase is our follicular phase, where estrogen begins to rise, and this lasts approximately, let's say, day 6 up until day 14. Throughout this phase, you might be experiencing more energy due to the rise in estrogen, more motivation, and this continues up until your ovulation, which lasts 1 day. This, let's say, is day 15 of your cycle. This is the day you're most fertile and when the egg is being released from the ovaries. Assuming the egg is not fertilized, you enter your luteal phase, which is the one that most women dread. This lasts somewhere between day 16 and, let's say, day 28 if your cycle is 28 days long. During this phase, your progesterone begins to rise, and this is also the hormone that is associated with all of the PMS symptoms, such as changes in mood, heightened irritability, drops in energy levels, etc. Apart from our reproductive hormones, insulin might also not be performing the same throughout our menstrual cycle. There is not a lot of research on this, but I found two specific papers. The first one talks about how our brain might play a role in an improved peripheral insulin sensitivity throughout our follicular phase compared to the luteal phase, which means that our body's response would be better thanks to our brain when ingesting sugars. The second paper was done on patients with type 1 diabetes, so the autoimmune type of diabetes, and their glycemic response was worse in the luteal phase compared to the follicular phase. If this holds true in future research papers, it's probably not going to be a very good combination in the way we feel throughout our luteal phase and the cravings that we experience. The one thing about the menstrual cycle that research is pretty definite about is that most women do experience heightened cravings, especially for sugar and for fat, throughout the luteal phase. There might be also an increased protein intake throughout our luteal phase. One research paper suggested that women consumed a few grams more on average compared to the follicular phase. Here I did not find any evidence about the amino acids requirements. Only on one podcast from Dr. Stacy Sims, she talked about how the heightened amino acid needs together with the heightened needs for carbohydrates support the development of the uterus lining, the thickening of that prior to us getting our periods. Furthermore, the concept of women having a faster metabolism during our luteal phase and higher energy needs is not as backed up by science as I expected it to be. Older research papers were pretty definite about this, while newer ones are not as impressed that this is indeed the case. The research papers that support women having higher energy needs throughout the luteal phase phase also do not present very big numbers that would make that much of a difference. For example, one research paper suggested that there is an increase of 4.3% in energy needs, and others found a non-significant difference in the energy needs of around 50 calories. Considering the popularity of this topic, I expected there to be more research into diets that are tailored to our menstrual cycle. Unfortunately, I found just one paper, and it is not exactly what you might have expected. The scientists constructed the so-called menstrualian program, where one group of women had to follow a specific diet and exercise protocol tailored to their cycle, and the other group did the same thing throughout the entire month. The cycle syncing group had just a different macronutrient distribution throughout the menstrual cycle. During their luteal phase, for example, they had higher percentage of the total energy intake from protein and from fat in order to kind of curb the energy cravings, since protein is the most satiating out of the three macronutrients. They also had an allowance of about 200 calories from dark chocolate to help improve cramps before the period comes and also to satisfy cravings. The outcome of the study was that, first of all, a lot of women dropped out of the intervention, which made the sample size a bit smaller. If you took out the women that did not complete the program, then there was a significant difference in the group that did the cycle syncing diet and the others, where the cycle syncing women lost a bit more weight. I'm not focusing on exercise in this vid, but just to give you a hint, they were not performing completely different types of exercise throughout the cycle syncing menstrualian program. Only during their period they had to choose like a light activity for the day, but otherwise they had a bit of a different workout distribution. But for example, resistance training was always on the list of exercises, and it was not like they were doing just Pilates during the luteal phase, and they did just strength training or cardio only during the follicular phase. Now that we finished talking about macros distribution, let's talk about specific nutrients that are supposed to improve estrogen production in moments in the cycle where estrogen is low, or if you believe you have a low estrogen. Here the main topic would be phytoestrogens, since they are compounds found in plants. Those are polyphenolic compounds that have a similar structure to estrogen and therefore can bind to the estrogen receptors in our body. Phytoestrogens come in many different shapes and forms, such as isoflavones, lignans, comestans, and they are present in a lot of plant products. The main one is soy and tofu, but we also have chickpeas, flaxseed, bee pollen as a supplement on the list, and they are promoted for people who want to boost their estrogen production, and in some cases I've seen them being promoted for the growth of your cherries. Guys, if it was that easy to grow your cherries, the breast implant industry wouldn't be existing. Phytoestrogens are also definitely not as potent and as strong as the actual estrogen in our body. Their potency is between 4,000 and 4 million times lower than that of 17-beta-estradiol, which is the most potent, most common form of estrogen when it comes to our reproductive system. They also do not exclusively stimulate the estrogen receptors. We have different types of receptors in multiple tissues and organs in our body, not just the reproductive organs, and depending on the tissue and the type of the receptor, phytoestrogens can also exert the opposite effect and actually block the receptor. Phytoestrogens can also block the enzyme aromatase, which is connected to estrogen synthesis, and even influence the HPA axis and also impact estrogen synthesis. It already gets a bit contradicting as to, does this decrease the amount of estrogen in our blood, or does this increase the amount of estrogen in our blood? And science has also been very inconclusive as to what exactly the impact of phytoestrogens in our body is, and is it of a large magnitude. The main market for them, and especially supplements containing those, are perimenopausal women and women already in menopause because of all of the negative symptoms that come with the drop in estrogen, such as hot flashes, trouble sleeping, fatigue. And those types of supplements have proven in scientific studies to help alleviate some of these very negative symptoms that can last for years. In women who have already entered menopause, estrogen supplements are being promoted to support bone density maintenance and bone health, since when estrogen is not being produced in the body anymore, one of the areas of our health that suffers is exactly our bone health. If we go to the earlier periods in life, there is some debate whether phytoestrogen consumption can influence the early onset of puberty in girls and whether it can reduce breast cancer risk or increase breast cancer risks. It gets very confusing at some point, and this is mainly because breast cancer, the breast tumors, are tumors that are dependent on estrogen. And if you already have breast cancer, or not only cancer, also fibroids in your uterus, which are also estrogen dependent, and if they're very small they can just sit there, but if they get bigger they need to be surgically removed. Those types of things grow with a higher concentration of estrogen in our body, and this is why phytoestrogen supplements are not being promoted generally to absolutely everyone. There is a misconception that more estrogen is better, where it's quite the contrary, and too much estrogen can actually have some negative influences on our overall health. Also, there is this carrot salad that is being promoted all over TikTok for flushing out excess estrogen because it contains fiber and whatnot. There is little to no scientific evidence backing this, and although fiber can help flush out other things, as I mentioned in a previous video, such as excess cholesterol, and science is pretty definite about this specific thing, it's not the same for every type of compound that is present in your gut and that fiber could technically bind to. And there are other strategies that could help lower excessive estrogen that I'm going to talk about in a bit, that have nothing to do with eating a carrot salad on rotation. I want to briefly mention phytoestrogens since nobody talks about them and there is not a lot of evidence, but the one that is out there is pretty promising. These are compounds which, similarly to phytoestrogens, do the same thing but for progesterone. They stimulate the progesterone production in our body. And while there is no human data, in vitro studies, so studies on cell lines, have shown that there are some anti-tumor and anti-fibrotic effects, and they're even being investigated for a potential positive influence on endometriosis. And we know that there is not a lot done about endometriosis research in general, unfortunately, and it's an issue that requires years to be correctly diagnosed. Some phytoprogestins are apigenin, luteolin, and naringenin. The most ubiquitous in food, I believe, would be naringenin because it's found in grapefruit and in other citrus fruits, while the case with apigenin and luteolin is a bit different. They're found in some specific spices and also some vegetables. I don't even think that they're available as a supplement yet because the research is so little, but I hope that we get more info on them in the future and that there are some breakthroughs made, especially when talking about the antifibrotic and the endometriosis influences. Now let's talk about what the hormone balancing advice online gets very correct and what probably has the largest impact on everybody's health. This is all done through an indirect effect on your reproductive hormones. I think you got the idea that you can't do much to directly stimulate the specific hormone through specific nutrients and foods, but you can do things kind of through the back door that would support the natural balance of these hormones. The main player here is again a hormone, but not a reproductive one, and this is insulin. Insulin resistance and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, those are things that go almost always together hand in hand. Insulin resistance leads to heightened production of insulin in your body since your receptors are not as sensitive to it anymore, so your body just makes more to make up for it. This unfortunately stimulates the production of androgens, so male hormones, from our ovaries. And this is what causes a large amount of the negative symptoms that come with PCOS, such as acne and facial hair and generally body hair where it shouldn't be for a woman. At the same time, insulin also decreases the amount of SHBG, or sex hormone binding globulin, produced in the liver, which increases indirectly the amounts of circulating androgens, so the male hormones, testosterone and others. As if that wasn't enough, there's also a decrease in another type of protein, the IGF binding protein, which increases the amount of androgens in our ovarian cells. All of this negatively impacts our oocyte development and quality. Oocyte is the immature form of the egg that we release during ovulation. So now you probably see why women who have PCOS also struggle with fertility. A lot of the meals that you see being promoted for cycle syncing or hormone balancing and whatnot, all of those recipes are usually pretty balanced meals. They involve some type of complex carb, some type of vegetable, and also a lean protein. And all of these things together, if you consume them at each meal, would lead to one having better glycemic control, better blood sugar regulation, since a balanced meal that contains good amounts of fat, carbs and protein, this would not create the glucose spike that consuming naked carbs would. It would also 100% lead to a flatter insulin response curve and a prolonged satiety signal. A lot of these balanced meals, at least the salad proportion of them, also contain good amounts of polyphenols, of antioxidants, vitamins and minerals, and all of these contributes to our body not experiencing extreme amounts of oxidative stress, since antioxidants can neutralize that up to a point, which would help us to avoid a state of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is also indirectly linked to our reproductive hormones. In research papers, an association between inflammation indexes and excess estrogen has already been made. If you consume these types of meals on a regular basis, and considering that you don't overdo the sugary snacks and the energy intake in general, you would probably be at a healthy weight that does not contribute to the production of excessive amounts of estrogen. This is because in people who are overweight or obese, because they have higher amounts of fatty tissue, they also tend to have more excess estrogen than people who are of a healthy weight. On the other hand, an increase in the SHBG, this is the binding globulin that lowers the circulating amounts in your system of estrogen and also other reproductive hormones. This one is also increased when one loses weight. So weight management is one of the most important things that one has to pay attention to when considering overall hormonal health and balance. So you see how it does not come down in 100% of the times to a specific food or specific supplement. The overall dietary pattern plays the most significant role in the homeostasis of our hormonal system. Of course, there are other things that could negatively influence this balance, such as excessive psychological stress, excessive amounts of exercise, so physical stress, and also malnutrition. So this would be an insufficient amount of energy, being at a dangerously low body weight, or also not getting specific nutrients in high enough amounts. Such nutrients would be, for example, those that are required for the function of your thyroid gland, which is responsible for producing hormones that are tightly connected to your energy and metabolism. But I'm leaving that for a subsequent video since this one is already getting too long. All in all, if somebody tells you that you should be consuming this specific food at this time of the month, or this food specifically to boost this hormone, this is probably not legit advice and has little to no scientific backing to that, and your overall dietary pattern is the most crucial thing when it comes down to hormonal health. And health in general. Thank you very much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the contents of the video. Let me know down in the comments if you did, and if you would like me to do a video on a specific topic next time. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it this far. Also, check out my socials and my website in the description box. I also have additional resources on there and even my own nutrition counseling services. Thank you again very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.